covering this later on.
Alright. What we're here to debate is that women consume what men produce. And judging by everything we've already discussed in this year so far and the readings that we've done, we believe that this is true. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to give you a brief introduction of what we mean by consuming what is being produced. And then we're going to talk about what the separate fears are and the gender roles that have been established in this time period between the 1890s and the 1930s in North America. And then we're going to be talking about the nature of advertising and its effect on this idea of who's consuming and who's producing. And then we're going to finish off with the new freedom that has been afforded the consuming class that has developed in this consuming society. So, first I want to just point out that women are the ones who consume what men produce. And this definition of consumption that we're going on is, at least to the eyes of the advertiser or the producer, the most important part of consuming is when their product's actually been purchased. To them, that's what consumption is. So when somebody goes out and purchases a product, boom, it's been consumed. They spent money for the transaction of that product. So who does the consuming in this kind of society? Well, historically speaking, before we went into the mass consumption society that developed in this time period that we're talking about, it was more of an agrarian society where women were the managers of the household. They would keep track of the supplies that they needed, what needed to be produced to be maintained in the household, such as food supplies, clothing, what needed to be made, and all this stuff. While they were doing that, the men were on the field working, doing their hard labor. Okay? Now, with the Industrial Revolution and new department stores and men having to go out into the city to do this work, working long hours because you didn't have unions. They had to start work really early in the morning, get off late at night. So the women, rather than working out on the farm because they live in the city now, they would actually go out and purchase these goods to be consumed in the household. So what has changed is that men are now working in the city. Women are going out producing or purchasing these goods that have been produced by the men who are working to produce them. Okay, so men produce, women consume. Now, a problem is perhaps how much money is actually spent on consumption. Okay, I don't think that's an accurate reflection on what is being consumed and between the two kind of gender roles, because men and women buy different things. Okay, I want to argue for the quantity of material that's being consumed and purchased as opposed to the actual cost. Because let's say the man who's making the money, he buys a house, okay, or he buys a vehicle of some sort, a horse, whatever. These big, huge purchases, right? That might happen once every few years. Okay, that's not consistent consumption. Meanwhile, the woman of the household is going out to actually purchase or consume, in the eyes of the advertisers and the people who produced it, food, clothing, and everything else that this new consuming society has developed. Okay, so the fact that they're consuming on an everyday basis or at a much more regular basis than the men, even though all those minor purchases don't add up to the big consumption, that's still producing or that's still consuming more. And that's why, as we'll see, advertising is targeting the women, and they're using the new sphere to their new entrance into this public sphere to be able to do all this consuming that they couldn't do before. And with that, I'll leave it to Ken.